Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Unicorn Warriors Eternal. I'm talking about the first 10 episode season of this show, and this is the latest from Genndy Tartakovsky and a lot of his kind of primal crew. It's a show that he's been trying to make for over 20 years. Some say because it had a female lead. I would say because it's weird as fuck. I'm sure they're like, this is strange. I don't know about this, but probably mainly the sexism thing. However, this is an interesting show because I don't think you could really get the vibe of it, really know what's going on for a few episodes. The character design is very cartoony. It's very influenced by Max Fleischer and Osamu Tezuka. It is some real animation dork shit. To the point where, like, there's some cartoons I will recommend to, like, people who don't watch cartoons. I'm like, you have to watch Primal. It's so good. You have to watch this, And this is one I was like, I'm just, you know what? I'm not going to do that this time. I really do like this show a lot. But this is like, when people say, like, you look at a Scorsese or a Spielberg and be like, oh, this is for the film dorks. This is that, but for people who like animation. If you're not into this, I don't think you'd be watching this video, or you would have turned off by now. But if you are, this is your shit. If it is not, then you don't even know what this is. So it is like Primal. I could see people going like, oh man, Primal's so cool, everyone's heard of that. But this is like, hey, are you still watching the Fleischer Brothers and thinking about Astro Boy? Well, guess what? It's just really like, this is an animation dork show, and it's very complicated. There's a lot of weird fantasy crap in it, but I really like that about it. There's not a show that I've not wanted to tell anyone about because it's so dorky and weird and in its own head, and actually really, really like as a cinematic and animation achievement. I don't think, maybe it's not doing like what Primal does, or Samurai Jack, or the Clone Wars things, or various other, even as mainstream as the Hotel Transylvania movies, or the first three that he directed. But this feels like as much as you're like, Genndy can totally do his thing, this feels like Genndy wants to do his thing and likes weird TV production, from the beginning intro and outro to how this feels like a deeply complicated sci-fi thing, to all the steampunk stuff. Like this is real out there, but I love being out there at the same time. This is a very weird, very strange sci-fi thing that I think you'd really have to be in the right state of mind to get into. And I don't even think you could get this show. Like I saw people doing 1-2 episode things and not going review of the whole show, which sort of annoyed me, to be honest with you. But I kind of felt like, I don't even know if you got the show, to be honest. It's like there's some shows you can do that, and some shows you can put out a quick thing or whatever, but like this is like an overly complicated, confusing narrative, and they keep adding to it and adding characters, and I almost felt like this is setting up for a cool season 2, but I also felt like while I was watching it, this lore just keeps expanding and expanding, and as much as I get used to it, my understanding of it constantly is changing per episode, and which is pretty remarkable that I was as into it, because you find that, I think, to be frustrating based on modern storytelling. I think if you are into how a miniseries goes, this is very much someone who likes episodic television, likes episodic kind of chapter books or something like that. That's what this is. But if you're not into that sort of thing, this isn't for you, but it feels like someone who liked Pirates of Dark Water and He-Man Masters of the Universe and like Johnny Quest. It's all those things and none of them. It's so weird and original. But so what Unicorn Warriors Eternal is, which I'm sure you know because you probably watched it, if you're watching this video, because I do feel like it draws a real line in the sand. But in case for whatever reason, it is about basically these warriors who are fighting this eternal evil, and Merlin, the guy from like King Arthur and stuff, he uses these three characters: Melinda, who's like a dark witch, you have Edred, who's like an elf warrior, you have Seng, who's like a cosmic kind of monk guy, and then you have Copernicus, who all of their souls go into, and then they are brought back, and their souls are sent to new people each, like whenever the bad evil is back. And if you see in the first episode, they show you like various times where like presumably it looks like a Joan of Arc person, takes on Melinda. You have a cowboy kind of elf character. You have Sim as various different like characters, or Sin. You see them go into various bodies. And in this one, Melinda goes into this girl, Emma, and it's kind of like dealing with the fact that you have another consciousness in your body. And Sang goes into a young boy who is Edred's usual best friend, but now it's like sort of different. And Copernicus is the steampunk robot, and they're trying to sort of figure out how to fight this eternal evil. There's way more details from that, but I don't really want to list off everything. You should honestly just watch this show. It is talking about consciousness and the idea of consciousness, and the idea of if you were to take on someone's body like this is, it's not just a thing like, hey, we're back and the designs are cool. Like Genndy, co-writer Derek Bachman, who also worked on Primal and works on a lot of stuff, is an animation veteran, really get into how each of these bodies are different, the ideas of those things, worlds you're going into. Melinda, or Emma's fiance, because when she's transformed into Melinda, it's on her wedding day, which is like kind of fucked up. Copernicus, like I like, it's a really cool sequence, but like later I was like, that is really messed up. No wonder she's having such a hard time. And so her fiance follows them, and like he's involved. And there's so many things going on with this. Sometimes, even though I'd watch them like every day at lunch when I was at work and stuff, and I'd have to watch the previous day on, not because I forgot and it wasn't memorable, more because there's so much crazy shit going on. I just wanted to be reminded all of the context. I almost want to rewatch this when season 2 comes on, because there was so many little things. Like when I was researching this and watching reviews of just 2 episodes for some reason, I kept reminded of like the first episode in certain moments, because this is really jam-packed. And I do like how this design, like this is not afraid to be what it is, which I think I really like about it. I think too often with especially what is called adult animation, you're either Adult Swim and you're goofy and silly and you can sort of be as experimental as you want, or if you're an adult like action show, you kind of have to be a little more mature in theory, in at least design or something like that. You look at, What If, the Marvel show recently, you look at even what they do with the DC stuff, if it's not Adventures of Superman, but like more of the movies and stuff, if it's aimed at more an adult audience in America, you can't really get away with design like this. And he like goes full out cartoony Fleischer Brothers, Osamu Tezuka kind of stuff. Like that is some cartoon shit. Like that is not trying to be ashamed of it at all. And I don't think Genndy or anyone who works on this is ashamed of that, which I actually really like. I feel like so often I watch this stuff and it's very much like, oh, well, you have to make sure it's palatable for a modern audience, and this is like very much like, go fuck yourself, like you're in this or you're not. And that I actually really thought it was cool. I think Melinda and Emma is a great idea for a character. I like how they're playing with the ideas of these people going in certain things. I do wonder, there's a 4th season, supposedly the plan was to do 4 seasons. I don't know if like Max or HBO Max or Discovery, whatever the fuck it's gonna be if season 2 happens, what that's going to be, and especially at the very end, which I won't get into, but you should watch it. It gets real crazy. And whether they will continue to be the Warriors Eternal or not, what we'll learn about the past Warriors Eternal and the other kind of superpowered beings that are fighting this great evil. And what this evil is, I think that's an even bigger question. I mean, it almost like, as much as you get questions answered and start to figure things out and find the background of certain things, the more that you have even more questions, really. I mean, it's such a sprawling kind of narrative. It didn't feel like this one season really conquered it all, in a sense. It's such a different thing from his last thing, Primal, because Primal feels very quick and smart and efficient and complicated within that smart visual storytelling. And although that is true of the action sequence of something, it's almost like written by a completely different person in terms of how it just narrative. This felt not like as storyboard centered, although I think it probably had extensive storyboards. It felt like very much like writing and planned out. I know it's got more and more complicated as he developed it over 20 years. And to be honest, it feels like a very thick fantasy novel that has been in development and brewing and marinating in ideas that entire time. And it is cool, like some certain things. I don't know that much about the 1890s in London, but like even with when they're getting into the kind of mystics and things that they kind of get into in that, like what I'd heard about, I guess they're not mystics, but like psychics and stuff like that. What I heard about that felt fairly accurate, but it was also like very silly and cartoonish. It also could be very touching in some places, very odd. I find this to be such a hard right from what he's doing. Like each of the things, even with when Fixed eventually comes out, Primal becoming an anthology thing, but even what we've seen of Primal and this, like, just don't feel like the same person. And I think it shows what an interesting talent Genndy Tartakovsky is, because he's not doing the same thing. Like, if you say, what is a Genndy show, it feels like Primal is that, but this almost feels like almost in the Symbiotic Titan vein. It feels less like his specific, like, very planned out visual storyteller kind of action way that we've gotten used to with him, although that's there too. It feels like a very dense storyteller that we've maybe not seen as much before, maybe in certain things like Samurai Jack, but this feels so much more denser, and it feels like there's a larger world at play, which is another thing I don't like about world building in the modern sense. It feels like everyone tries to sort of overwhelm you and be like, here is all of it, get into it. And like, if you look at, I talked about this in Nimona, actually, in my review of Nimona, where it's like, if you watch the original Star Wars, it just kind of like hints at a bunch of stuff, but hints at it where you're like curious, where you're like, wait, what's a Clone Wars? What's the Empire? What are you talking about? And you're like you can see why like books and all that stuff sold so much from that, because you're curious, you want to get into that world because it hints at so much. With Unicorn Warriors Eternal, I actually don't think it hints at stuff. I just think it's like, also there's this tiger and he can do special powers now, by the way. I just thought I'd throw it out there. And it's like, you never know what it's going to throw you, and it does feel a little like, let's see what sticks, but it also feels like they planned out something really cool and interesting. So I do think this is more of like, there is a vast lore and you can tell that it's there, but they hint at some things, but then they don't hint at other things, and then that'll become the major part of the episode or something. So it is very much like playing in this world of like, we're hinting at a larger world. We're telling you like less than what most people do, to a much more extreme than even like the first Star Wars did, which I find really fascinating in a storytelling angle. I really do like this show. I don't know if Primal I was so exuberant about and recommending to people. This feels like it's very much within its own thing, but I still really do like it. Like, I was very much like, oh, I should check out this. I should watch so many in a row. I can wait. It's like, it's gonna end soon. And every day at lunch I would go, but what's gonna happen to Melinda? Like, what's the deal with her fiance? What's going on with Edred? And that. What's going on with Merlin? Like, it just kind of like, once I got really into it, because it took a few episodes, and then I was suddenly like determined through this narrative. But I kind of almost am like, what is the ultimate? I don't think this is saying everything it needs to say. I felt like I watched a complete narrative for them, the Warriors Eternal, but I don't even know this unicorn. Like, I barely saw the titular unicorn barely is in this thing. So I do feel like we got them, we understand how they are, them as a team, but I feel like there's so much more in this world, and I almost think like this does feel like a complete season in some points, but it also feels like I don't know where this is going fully, and I'm very curious about season 2. Like, I'm very curious, but I also feel like I almost don't know what this whole thing and what the point of this whole thing and what he's doing with this, other than like, it does look really neat and he's really good at it. And watching Genndy Tartakovsky do a huge like design tribute to Osamu Tezuka and Max Fleischer is pretty cool. Like, as just like a visual exercise and as just a wonderful piece of animation, I mean, I think this is really great, and I think it's one of the great action shows of our era. Absolutely. I am just like, where the fuck, what is this? And I think like that will ultimately be the deciding kind of factor on what this will be fully, because I do note people are confused and not sure where to take this. And if this really, I'm not going to doubt him as a storyteller. He's a great storyteller, but I think as a story, you can tell that this is one of 4 and not one of this complete story. I think it completes who these people are, but what the story that they're using these characters for is a separate matter that almost this needs to figure out what they're doing. And there's certain things they hint at towards the end, particularly with Melinda, but who's mainly the main focus. But I am curious, like, are we going to continue to use these people? Are we not? I think if you didn't, that would be stupid in terms of season 2 because we built so much with them. But where is this all going and what does it all mean? And but I'm sort of like, I'm very, very curious. I don't know how long it'll take for another season. I don't know, like, if they approved all of the 4 seasons or whatever. But I do think that this is something that I am very much in. I think once you're into it and its own weird kind of world, but this is very much like you have to kind of be into these things to be into it, and it's not really trying to get anyone else in there. This is totally out there kind of sci-fi fantasy kind of stuff, and done in a totally out there animation way. It's sort of perfect in its outsiderness, and I love kind of being on the outside and witnessing what Genndy and all of them can do with their weird, strange, odd little story. And what's it all going to mean? I don't know, but fuck if I enjoyed watching it. So if you have seen Season 1 of Unicorn Warriors Eternal and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if